We're being live streamed and
Oh my
recorded.
gosh, we're being live streamed on Facebook. All right, you guys, it's Cate Stillman here with Cate Silcox and Brett Larkin, who are each going to do a brief introduction. And I wanted to bring these friends together and talk about success success as wellness pros in yoga and Ayurveda. We've all been in this field for a couple decades, and I find that a good, honest conversation about what's going on behind the scenes is probably a good idea in the age of, the stuff I see on Instagram. So let's start with Brett. Quick intro on your professional wellness path.
Sure. So I grew up as a YouTuber. So I have a now large YouTube channel of just streaming yoga videos, and then really figured out that my sweet spot was like the hardcore yoga enthusiast. So I started putting yoga teacher training online back in 2015, and everyone thought I was crazy and who would want to do yoga teacher training online? But I had a mobile app and just was really early to that space. So that is my core offering, online 200, 300, and now a Kundalini specific 200-hour certification. And I also have an enthusiast community called Uplifted, which is really for people who want to go more into Vedic philosophy and wisdom, ancient wisdom of yoga, and integrate that with asana in order to personalize their practice at home. So that's me.
Awesome. And so brettlarkin.com, where you find all things Brett. All right. And Cate Silcox.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cate Silcox. I'm the author of a book I call Cosmo Magazine Meets Ancient Ayurveda called Healthy, Happy, Sexy. And I have an online school for women that certifies Ayurveda health coaches that really attempts to bridge the gap between a regular woman's experience and these beautiful ancient teachings.
And we can find Cate at theshaktischool.com. For those who don't know me, Cate Stillman, yogahealer.com since 2001. Practical, basically blending Ayurveda and yoga into like practical, how do you thrive in your body and your life? And then we developed yoga health coaching down the line, which is a wellness pro business model, transformational journey. How do you lead, guide, and what's the business model behind that? That's scalable. All right. So enough about us. Let's talk about the early days, because one of the things I notice in general is people are like, they see people that are, and we'll use air quotes around the word success until we define that in the future. And it's kind of like you were born that way. It was easier for you. And I get, like we are three white women somewhere. Brett, are you 40 yet or no?
No, 36,
48, and
just infinite consciousness.
Infinite. Okay. And there's this sense of like, I have to start from nothing. So can we start with our start from nothing stories? Sure. As untrue as those are, because no one really is starting from nothing.
I'm happy to share. I was actually too afraid to teach a yoga class. So I was one of those people who did yoga teacher training just to deepen my own practice. And I was in denial about my desire to be a healer and help others. So I went through my whole yoga teacher journey just saying I was doing it for myself. And I was terrified to approach studios. I mean, this was back in 2010. I felt so intimidated, but I had gone to film school when I was in college. I studied screenwriting and, TV writing, all that kind of thing. So I decided when I developed this yoga sequence I really liked, I have a dance background as well. I was like, you know what, I'm going to film it because I wanted to kind of remember the sequence, remember the choreography. And I used to have to submit videos all the time to go to dance camp and stuff when I was in high school. So I was like, this is my comfort zone. And I threw it on YouTube and I didn't really have any expectation. It wasn't like, I think I just put it on YouTube because I was like, that's where I can store the video so I can find it later. And that was really my first baby step. It was and I think this is a really key point that I was actually talking to some of my 300-hour students about just yesterday, is really like bringing that playful, fun, light energy into your business ventures is so critical. I mean, if you are in what I call man mode, which is not about men, we both have these masculine and feminine energies within us, all of us. I just call it man mode because it's like that go, go, go hustle. Everything's hard. I need to get more done. It's really kind of setting yourself up for burnout and feeling really frustrated. So I love reflecting back on the early days because it just had a lot of playfulness. I had zero expectations that anyone would watch this video. And then when people did watch it, I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And of course, I followed it up with more and more videos. And then I was like, maybe I should post once a week. Oh, people are asking for these different types of classes. And, getting into action really gave me the confidence to then go get those studio teaching jobs, and also got me connected to an audience where I could get feedback. And that's easy because people just tell you what they want and you're able to just go and make it. There's more to this story about how this actually became a business, because having a big YouTube channel, even 500,000 subscribers like I have, that's not a business. I mean, the AdSense revenue is pretty low, which I think is important for people to know. So there's a business building story on top of that, but that was like kind of my very first step.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea for us to also get in. We have a lot to talk about, but to also get into like some of the misconceptions about like how a business runs that supports a person in lifestyle. Yeah. So Katie, early days.
Early days. Whenever I hear that phrase, I think of the British. I had never seen a copy of the yoga journal. I was living in Spain in like the middle of a nudist beach. And then I moved to India and I studied with AG and Inder Mohan in their house. And like, I remember meditating after this particularly beautiful Yoga Sutras chanting session with them. And there's a side joke to that. Mohan was trained by Krishnamacharya, and he was like, Katie, it's very confusing to me. The Yoga Alliance is asking what my teacher's website is, and so I was in this very sort of talk about privileged, in the sense of I was with the source of the source, right? In these beautiful teachings in India. And then I moved to San Francisco and I was like, oh my God, like yoga as consumerism, it was like a totally foreign world to me, and which I can wholeheartedly embrace in some ways, but it was very antithetical to everything I'd learned in India. But I remember being with Mohan and sitting alone in this little like ashram chamber I was staying in, and I was feeling the energy of yoga and meditation in my body. And I was overwhelmed by this feeling of like, oh my God, everybody needs this, and so for me, the early days were like a honeymoon. It was like a love affair where I just fell so madly in love with these teachings. And I moved to San Francisco, and to, your point, Brett, I remember going into studios with extreme confidence around what I was meant to be doing in the world, and how fully I knew in every fiber of my being that this was my destiny. And walking into a studio in San Francisco and just getting completely shot down and told, probably not. It's going to be really hard for you to teach this esoteric, tantric, goddessy, feminine formy yoga that you think you've invented. It's going to be really tough.
You've invented.
Yeah. And you've got to dumb it down, Cate Silcox. Like, nobody wants to hear your woo-woo dolphins and rainbows stuff. And they were right. Like, I never had massive classes in San Francisco. I was always sort of like a fringy teacher. And so the early days were really hard. And I taught 15 classes a week all over the Bay Area. I remember parking my car in front of a yoga studio where I would have 5 students who I still love, and going out to my car and seeing that I had a parking ticket that would not cover like a week's worth of teaching at that studio, and just weeping, and so early days were tough. And I also feel like they propelled me to want to come to a place where I could make a living for myself and buy a home for myself and make my own money. It really did propel me to want to have financial success in a quote industry where everyone said I would never make any money.
Oh my gosh, you brought back memories of me parking my like 1985 Subaru in the outer sunset, sleeping in my car so I could go to the teacher training at Iyengar Yoga Institute. And I was back and forth between the California College and Ayurveda and the Iyengar Yoga Institute, and just like making it work, right? Like just making it work. So it's so easy, I think, for people, especially now where because we all did that before Instagram. So there wasn't this sense of other people marketing to us being like, look how easy it is. Like that wasn't the message. The message was like, you are going to fail. There is no industry. I mean, my parents looked at me, they had dumped whatever into my college education. And it was an excellent education. And I was like, I need to know Ayurveda. So I will self-fund my next level of education. And they're looking at me like, are you what? Right. And like, you're trading and being an American now for the, right. I mean, like yoga was out there 25 years ago. And so there is the calling, and I'm glad we all have spoken to that. There was a need to know, and then a need to share. And that a need to share is what stimulated the dynamic conversation, which then drove the curriculums. I think for all of us, I think we're all saying the same thing. It was the curriculums arose out of the conversations.
100%.
You too, Brent? I mean, what do you?
Yes. I mean, it's
questions
really,
on the YouTube comments and
it's really incredible also how much people can learn if you just find the right mentors and get in the right groups. Because again, this was 2012. I had a mentor who was like, Facebook group, get a Facebook group. So I was like, okay. So I had a Facebook group in conjunction to my YouTube channel, and the Facebook group ended up being really valuable because unlike YouTube comments, people could dialogue and discuss and talk to each other in there, and I could answer them. And it just felt a lot more personal because I could see their face. And what happened is, they gave me the idea for online yoga teacher training. They told me, they were like,
well, that's exactly it, right?
We want to do online teacher training with you. And I was like, that's so silly. You don't really want that. Like, you can't do yoga teacher training online. So, I mean, even the backbone of my business, that program is probably 80% of my revenue, wasn't my idea. I mean, it was their idea. They told me they wanted it. Obviously, I executed on it. But
you listened.
I was skeptical. I was like, is anyone going to buy this? It felt very frightening, even once I had the validation to really invest, because I put up a lot of money because my program's professionally filmed. It's on a mobile app. I have paper manuals that ship globally. Like it's big. And I remember even being on set filming it and feeling terrified. Like, am I going to be in debt for the rest of my life because of this? But yeah, I think that's where I really encourage anyone listening. It's like, get into action and start forming that community, even if you think it's small, because these people are attracted to your energy and they're going to tell you and guide you. This is like great news. You don't have to figure it out alone. If you think you have to figure out alone, you're missing the point, right? You're going to co-create with your audience. It's this beautiful dynamic dance between the two of you. So yeah, that was my YTT creation.
I think this is such a huge lesson, because what we found through teaching business to yogis for years and years and years is like the cultural creatives often want to create, but if they're not creating in community and dialogue, either there's no demand for what they create, or they really created the wrong thing. Like they really did create something that's not usable.
And I was telling my students, because the 300 program, I had like a big business component, because like at that level, I'm assuming you're doing this as a career. I was talking to them about like, you can pre-sell stuff. And if no one buys it, just refund the people who bought, right? Like assuming it's not a retreat to Morocco, like if we're talking digital products, like that is not a big deal. And that is actually what I did with my inaugural YTT class. I pre-sold it. And then once I hit a certain amount of people, I felt more comfortable to, go into the debt to film the thing. I mean, I was still terrified, but that I always call it like fail fast mentality, which is that experimentation, playful, Shakti energy of just having fun and not taking it too seriously. I think the more people can invite that in and use their business as a spiritual practice, because that's what I do. I'm like, this is a practice of non-attachment. This is a make your business your spiritual practice, and it changes everything. Yeah.
Katie, in what way did your community guide what it's become?
Exactly the same. I wrote Healthy, Happy, Sexy because I wanted to. And when it came out, my students kept asking me to do an Ayurveda because I was a yoga teacher, and now I don't teach yoga at all. And they said that we want an Ayurveda teacher training. And I was the same as Brett. I was like, what? Really? And I finally just started listening to them. And, I think there are a number of ways that you can be successful in starting your own, spirit and heart fueled business. And I've always kind of operated, and it may change in the future, but I've always tried to very much operate on the bootstrap method. And I loved Brett's idea of like pre-sale and like put it out there and hashtag you can refund them, like be ballsy, like put it out there. And I've always kind of taken pride in the fact that I've never had any debt, nor have I taken any investor money, and that's not the path for everyone. I think there's great value in other models. But what I loved about that is that it enabled me to continue to grow from a really balanced place. And so whatever money I would make, I would just reinvest 30-40% back into the business. And in that way, I was able to keep all of my business, 100% ownership, and B, avoid the stress that comes from taking on a huge amount of debt. I've seen people get really excited about their yoga teacher trainings or their Ayurveda trainings and take on a ton of initial debt and not do any pre-market testing, pre-sales, and end up in a really stressful place. And so I've always encouraged my students, look, just start where you are, even if it means you're teaching to 5 people at the local basement of your church. In our case, we teach Ayurveda, so it's a little different. And really grow in a sustained way, in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Like a question I get a lot, Kate, I'm just gonna like jump in because my students are always like, well, I don't have a community yet. I don't have people I can pull yet. I don't have people I can ask yet. Like listeners, I know all the questions you're thinking. And I think Katie's making such a great point, which is like, you just have to start. You just have to start small. I have like a sacred circle facilitation module on 300. I'm like, can you just run a sacred circle with like people, around a topic you're passionate about? Like, here's the outline, just phone up a friend. It can be like your mom, your aunt, and 2 friends. The other big tip I want to give people who are listening is like, I think they think, oh, I need to build community. And they're like, okay, I need to be on Facebook and I need to be on Instagram and I need to be on TikTok and I need to be on Snap. I need to be posting to all of them like 5 times a day. And I'm getting anxious just saying this. I would really encourage you to just pick the platform that you genuinely like and are energetically drawn to. So if you're someone who's like, you're just always opening Instagram, like that's your vibe, that's where you like hanging out, just focus on that channel and be consistent. It doesn't have to be every day. Do 3 times a week, do once a week, go live, teach live, like live stream a class on Instagram. Just be consistent. Like I have posts on YouTube every week for 8 years, 7 years. Like videos went out when I was in labor. Videos went out when I was on my honeymoon. Like they were pre-scheduled, but like I never missed a week. And it's really kind of boring advice. So I think people don't want to hear it, but it's like that consistency combined with a platform you love. Like I love long form video. I love editing. I love the whole transmission of yoga online. For someone else, that might be like live streaming, or they love shorts, or they love TikTok. So just pick one platform that's your favorite and just show up consistently there. And you'll see that community will emerge.
Yeah. And what I would add to that comes up a lot for me in our school, we do a business module too, because we're assuming many of them want to be Ayurveda health coaches, is stop looking at other people's Instagram that have a ton of followers and focus more on what you can do on the ground now and to build the community. Because I think people see the quote end result of the people they admire or their teachers, and they think they need to pop into that emulation model. And what I want to tell people, and this is a little bit a function of the fact that I'm 41 years old, right? And it's not to throw off on our hashtag millennials, but the thing is, guys, I mean, the women in this room right now, we have like pounded the pavement IRL, right? Like, do not be afraid to live in the real world. And what I'm telling my students right now is, do you want my prediction for next year and the next year on how you can make a ton of money? Learn a modality that helps people downregulate and balance their nervous system, and put a button on the internet where people can send you money. If you don't have a button on the internet where people can send you money, like we aren't, it can be $90, it can be $9, but if you have an offering, especially a one-on-one offering, put that up there and then be in the real world. People are going to be in the next 2 years so longing to be in the real world. That's how you make those heart-to-heart connections. Then they'll sign up for anything online that you put out there. and I realize that's not everyone's entry portal, but I think it's going to be an ever more important one in this world where we're all kind of like, I mean, I'm adoring being with you all right now, but I would love to be in real life.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a real money maker as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all part of the how to connect and get it. And I think just these quick, it's like we all went through probably like seeing like the webinar phase and like what was before the Facebook group, like, and all these things are being marketed to the wellness pros.
The conference.
Ayurveda Summit 2015.
Yeah.
So a few things I want to recap. Like one is to Brett's point, like and I wouldn't even say find your platform as much as find your modality first. So if it's, for me, like I am an intellect, I'm a jnana yogi. I'm not a bhakti yogi. I'm not a seva yogi. Like my path is intellectual. My tool is the keyboard. Like it would have been the quill, right? And then the pen, but now it's the keyboard. And so what skill do I need to hone? For me, thinking is honed through writing, and writing is hard, and writing is insanely time intensive to do it well and right, and to be a good self-editor, and to do it as a process of becoming smarter, which is probably the number one reason I write, is so that I can understand and learn and grow, and then communicate that in a very practical way to people who can't put that kind of time in. So if it's writing, or if it's video, or if it's a mix of photo and text or whatever, like we need to see these as different skills that we're honing. And I would say, ask ourselves, like, where do I want to be with that skill in a decade? Because like good skills, and I noticed this with one of the massive breakthroughs I've had as a writer, and I didn't know this about myself either. Like I didn't know I was a writer when I started writing. And I didn't know that I was good at it. People just kept telling me the way I was putting things was really practical. And I noticed the more research I did, the more practically I could put the simplest thing and then explain it in depth as needed. As I've become my own editor, I've become my own image generator, and then I have an artist rework images. Like I've totally changed my own writing process. But again, it's like, that's the skill I want to have in my 50s, right? I want to be able to communicate clearly, succinctly, and have the knowledge to back up what I'm saying. So I think that's a part of it. And it's not just about, like Brett pointed out, like the more, better, quicker posting. I mean, the regularity, yes. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what changed in COVID. What changed in your business, and what changed in how you want to work in the world?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Go ahead, Cate.
I feel like we were really fortunate in the sense that we already had an online platform 3 years before COVID. And so for me, it felt like this really incredibly strange time to feel the blessing of that online platform amidst the backdrop of so much suffering, on the physical realm of COVID, but also the social realm. We all kind of went through a reckoning culturally and socially. And so for us, it was an amazing exercise in how to really show up for the community in a new way. And I'm not like blowing my own horn around this, but we did a lot during that time to try to make our course more accessible to women that didn't look like me. Yeah. And that was amazing. And we were really, really successful. And so I'm super proud about that. But at the same time, it also was really challenging because the people that were coming to our course, many of them were in lockdown and quarantine, and we were training them in this methodology that has to do with the deep need for the interconnectivity of all of life. And so for us, it also just felt like Zoom was this magical thing, this great gift that actually enabled us to kind of reach our tentacles of prana out across the whole world and be able to hold this room together, like a space together. And I think it was incredible. It was like the way that I stayed sane was knowing that every Wednesday I was going to come into the classroom, whether I was teaching or we have 15 teachers and I get to be a student with them as well. But I realized that, we had a very different experience than a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
We really thrived, to be quite honest.
And Brett?
Yeah, echoing Katie, similarly, I had been online with the online teacher training for 5 years. So it was a similar experience of suddenly so much of my marketing and so much of my work for 5 years had been justifying the fact that you can train online and have a fantastic experience. That was what all my marketing was about. I had an entire section of my training that just explained what Zoom was and how to use it. Because, we had an orientation week that was just really about Zoom, because in 2015, 16, 17, 18, we needed that. And then all of a sudden it was like overnight, I had always felt like a little bit like a pariah, because the pure online 200-hour it was really me and only one other person in the space, one other wonderful female teacher with her own school. It was just her and I. And then all of a sudden it was just like the floodgates opened.
Yeah.
So it was a year of just crazy growth. Of course, I was also pregnant. So it was just like this rajastic energy inside my body, in the company. I did so much hiring. My husband actually joined me full time for a huge portion of that year. It was explosive growth. It was like drinking out of a fire hose. And what's interesting now is, the entire landscape has changed. So much of my marketing had to change because I didn't have to convince people anymore. So my syllabus changed. We didn't have Zoom orientation anymore. Like half the people had been on a Zoom call earlier that day. So it was really just this fascinating year of just really needing to change everything about the marketing. Luckily, the core principle of the training was just there, and it remains the same. And now in kind of this post-COVID landscape, it's such a different world. It's not just me and one other woman anymore. It's like every yoga school is online now.
Yeah.
So it's a whole
how's
new world.
How's that affected you? Like what?
There's still increased demand, but now I have a lot more competition in quotes, right? I think, the right students find the right program. But yeah, it's definitely now, especially things that I think are going to open back up. I'm hoping, right? So I think it's going to be a whole new landscape, right? And I think this is a great message for anyone listening too. It's like your business is going to have seasons. Like I felt like I had this season of being pregnant in my business, like 3, 4, 5xing. And now I'm in this season where things are slowing down. And, having the grace, the resiliency, the vision to be like, I'm okay with this, right? Like a tree blossoms and then it has winter. And, I know that things are going to continue to evolve. And I think that's part of really having that broad and deep perspective. Like I think of third eye, right? Like of your business and of your life. Like there's going to be seasons. So there's going to be these moments where you're hustling, and then there's going to be moments where it's slower, and just trying to appreciate each season. So that's like part of, again, my business is my spiritual practice. So as things slow down after COVID, and I've talked to other entrepreneurs, like even other big YouTubers, because YouTube, like all the numbers were crazy. It was just a crazy spike. And now when we talk, we're all like, YouTube tells us we're failing, because YouTube has all these like really dramatic dashboards that have all this data about like viewership going down, And a close friend of mine, she has over 1 million subscribers. She was like, we're all just going down because we were on a crazy high for like 18 months. Yeah. She's like, your channel's not doing worse. She's like, my stats, everyone's stats in the industry are the same. Things are just slowing down a little bit right now. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster. I think that's the summary. It's been a roller coaster.
So let's talk about success. Let's talk about what is a holistic, like you're as measuring what is success on your path as a, there's a lot of paths here, right? There's like the path as a practitioner. There's the path as a leader. There's the path as a teacher, and there's a path as a business owner. Some of us have employees, some of us have contractors. We all have overhead to run our businesses. So there's the financial success that needs to happen for the business to exist. How do you, let's talk about this. What is success?
Well, I kind of brought that up before we got on the call, and I'm not ignoring you. I'm pulling this up. It just happens to be on my phone. A friend sent me this, and it says, it's from Michael Mead. It says, when a person rises in power and wealth, there is also supposed to be an awakening of the nobility of their soul that makes it possible for them to see ways of serving other people rather than being only in service of their own sense of self. And I think success, when I hear that word, I'm a total tantric metaphysics geek. And by the way, Kate, the end result of Jnana Yoga is bhakti, no big deal, but you can just expect your heart to explode in love the more you do your, typing on the typewriter. But success is the realm of the goddess Lakshmi, and we're all maybe familiar with her, but she has these like massive breasts, and she's pouring coins out of her hand upon you. And everyone loves Lakshmi because she's orgasms and bonbons and money. And that's what we think of her as. But in fact, she's known in some circles in Tantra as the fickle one. She wants one thing one day, and then she changes her mind, or she gets what she wants, and now she wants something else, And so I really think of Lakshmi as her greater message is that the actual success is the extent to which we are connected to who we really are, which is, I'm sure, what all three of us are so passionate about, and why we want to share yoga and Ayurveda and mysticism in general. Is that, for me, this is not a business. This is my soul, this is my life's work as a mystic on the planet. And I just feel so crazy fortunate that has turned into a method or a business or a way of living where I can live in a more or less really comfortable way, which helps me become a better teacher so that I can serve other people. And I think, and this may seem obvious, but it's so important to remember over and over and over again. If you can figure out the way that you are meant to serve, and to serve that serving, and the way you know what you're meant to do is that you feel that spark of joy, and you feel that passion, that why I'm so in love with Kate. You have this irrepressible pleasure that comes from you when you talk about urine therapy. In a way, we're all down to drink our pee because you're telling us to, Kate, and we love you and believe you. But what is actually happening, and Brett said this too, your students are drawn to your energy, right? And if you can find that spark of life inside of you that brings you joy, and figure out a way to share that with other people, it's been my experience, not only personally, but with my students, the money comes. And this mentality of abundance is so important. There actually is no competition. Never, ever, ever. I could talk a lot more, but I'll just maybe pause and see if someone else wants to add something in.
Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
This is such a loaded one, because I think success can be defined on so many levels, right? It's like personal, your family, financial, all these different things. I think I love being an entrepreneur and getting to, I know it sounds so silly, but it's not just set my own schedule, but indulge in creating what I want to create when I want to create it, to create the transformational experience that someone can walk through. And to me, success, it's kind of like Katie. I feel like it's this ability to get yourself into a flow state. And I love what you said, Katie, about being aligned with your most authentic self, because I think a lot of us in this industry, it's to a certain extent, the business, it's not weird to say you're using your business, but it's the business, what I'm teaching is what I'm going through. It's what I need to hear myself. That's what I'm always preaching. So it's really just the most powerful self-help program that I've ever developed that's uniquely for me. It's all the things I need to hear and remind myself of over and over and over again. So I think when the success is sort of this Venn diagram of, your zone of genius, meeting and serving someone else, helping and aiding them through a transformation. And then there does need to be a product market fit. I mean, if you're afraid to charge money for what you're offering, that section of the Venn diagram isn't going to be working. But my experience is the more you invest in high quality mentors, which is something I've always done, by taking their programs, or there is an energetic investment, energetics of money. When you make an investment, you do level up. And I have seen this time and time again, not just in health and wellness. It's like when I invested in, whether it's couples therapy or something for my relationship, it's like I level up, our marriage gets better. I mean, it's so simple, it's stupid. So I think, being willing to invest in yourself is so important. I know that's something else we wanted to touch on. And I got away from the success question, but yeah, to me, it has something to do with like being your own boss, being in a flow state, and creating the most amazing self-help program for you. That's also facilitating transformation for others.
Yeah. Well, it is that, it's like, if you're not willing to invest in your own success, like forget it. Right. So there's that. I so second that. Like I've taught the Yogi Detox, yogidetox.com, twice a year since 2002. Right. And like to Brett's point of like, success happens when you stay in the same place with the same message for a long period of time. And you're really clear on what you do and why you're there. But I start every Yogi Detox with like, thank gosh you guys all showed up, because otherwise I probably wouldn't do this detox, and I need it like the rest of you. Like all of us, and it is that, like, create what you need to reinforce the conversation between your own ears.
Can I say something about the mentor piece?
Yeah.
I loved what Brett said about the best teachers are the ones who understand with humor and humility that we are the ones that need these teachings the most. And when people listening out there really get clear on that, and I mean, you shouldn't be like, being the head of AA when you haven't gotten sober yet. There is a place where you want to kind of have things a little bit stabilized, but post-scar tissue. Exactly. But this idea of the perfection of the person who is in the seat of leadership is like one that I think is dying with a number of different outdated hierarchical patriarchal models. But whenever right now I'm living in Hawaii on the land of my mentor, I can see her house from my hut. That's how close I want to be to my mentor. I meet with her because I don't have any children or husbands. And so this really is this period, and I may in the future, right? But like, so this is this period of my life where I can really give it to mentorship. And every time I hand her a check, which I love paying my mentors and teachers, I literally say to myself, I'm so excited. This is so much more money in the bank for me. Yeah. There's a direct relationship between me spending money on mentors and courses that are worth it, right? And what flows to me and through me. I think it's one of the most important ways. And obviously no one should go into debt or do anything crazy to do a course, but I think it's really important, especially when you are in the role of leader, to have someone that can hold you.
Yeah. Amen. I mean, it's so important to get this. Is like the idea of figuring it out on your own. Like, first of all, it's a myth. No one really figures it out on their own. It takes too long. Right. I mean, if imagine trying to uncover the subtle body anatomy on your own, like after growing up on a standard American diet, like good luck, 10 lifetimes later. Right. So business is no different. Like people that are good at business were either raised in a business savvy family or found mentors or invested in trainings and went to school and self-educated and learned by the school of hard knocks, which is an investment of time and energy too. But at some point it's easier to find, and it's easier to be guided with an expert. I think the other component we haven't hit on here yet, which is, I know, a core of all of what we do, and we already talked about community, but if you don't have a community of growth colleagues, you've just decelerated significantly. If you're not hanging out with people that are trying to play the same game and have a similar business model, it's like you're going to take in way too much information that hasn't been pre-digested and evaluated. It's like, it's so much harder to get any sort of traction.
Well, I think one of the things you're talking about, Kate, which I really second, is that we grow in relationship.
Yeah.
We don't grow in a silo. And I know Katie knows so much about tantric philosophy, probably more than I do, but this idea of polarity and you can't grow alone. I mean, that's why, like, for me, being married or being in, the masterminds that I'm in, it's like the most amazing mirror to all my own issues and insecurities. And then again, when you're right with the right partner, with the right group, they're really like facilitating this exponential growth for you. So yeah, just seconding what you're saying.
We see it all the time. I mean, in terms of the financial success, I mean, what we do a lot in yoga health coaching is the package, the pricing, the marketing and enrollment, and then delivery, like the whole coaching model. And it's, people will stop where they get stuck. And if they're not with a group that's going forward and someone to help them get through the hard part, like they will stop and they will think that they have self-worth issues or imposter syndrome issues or skill gaps that are modality training issues. And they're wrong. They just have an issue with something that's actually related to business. And so if they're not in business mentorship, they just stop. And that's true for me at my level too, right? Where it's like, you get to a certain, the issues you have at 50,000 are different than 100,000, are different than $250,000, are different than $500,000, that are different than $1 million, that are different than $1.5 million, that are, it's like, the issues keep coming at the different stages that require different mentorship or different tools and in a different type of community that understands that part. If we're talking about financial success, if we're talking about the other types of success, it all applies too in my experience.
Well, I want to share something about that. So to make it a little tantric on you, there's a word for it. It's vikalpa, and it's in the challenge of the vikalpa is these are false desires that are coming. These are real desires that are coming from an internal place that is subconscious. And I know all three of us have done this work. When we uncover the subconscious, we really do need a mentor, because our mind does such a good job at covering up that stuff for good reason. And, we could talk at length around why we do that. But one of my hugest financial releases happened at a workshop where I had an older woman, really cool yoga woman that I knew in San Francisco, say to me, help me uncover a false belief that had to do with nothing that was really related to my business or money. And it was related to how I felt about my dad and his history of having a really, really poverty-stricken existence, and how that was such a central feature of our dynamic growing up, was this sort of pride and the fact that my dad had no money, and like he lived in that house and that house and that house, and yet he was the star of the town because he was this football genius, right? And he had no dad, and the men would like hand him $5 bills when he would make a touchdown. So the lore of my family lineage on my dad's side was, we're proud of the fact that we're like trailer park people, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. It's like, hell yeah, man, I'm from Tennessee, like, and so a part of me didn't ever want to have a lot of money, because it would mean that I thought, right, it meant that I was leaving my father's lineage. And when I uncovered this, from one day to the next, I went from being totally in debt, living in San Francisco, selling my harmonium to make the rent, which I never got back, to never having debt again. And now I own free and clear my own home. And I mark that day of uncovering that original story about my relationship to my dad. And so I just want to encourage listeners out there. Cate is the master of teaching you guys the methodologies. Brett,
and the shadow issues.
And the shadow
issues, right? Because you've got to do the yoga.
But my point is, if you don't go to that deep, scary, spiritual, ooey gooey realm, that's it can still remain a hindrance. The number one thing I think people can do is look at those issues, and that helps liberate the prana.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It's like, if you don't have the right business model, it doesn't work. If you don't do the shadow issues around where you're stuck, it doesn't work. Like it's all that. So let's talk about investment in our final moments here with, what we are finding continually, and I do want to talk about debt and going into debt for growth, because I'll basically every national economy is doing that right now. And there's a great game on this called cash flow. It's like, you want to leverage debt, And I would say, as soon as the dollar went off the gold standard, unless you're entirely in Bitcoin, like you kind of want to leverage debt if your national economy is leveraging debt for your own growth. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people are holding themselves back from investing in self-development, wellness, wisdom, spiritual development, business growth. They're holding themselves back because they don't know how to leverage cash flow. They don't know how to leverage investment for return on investment. So I would like, and I guess my point in this isn't necessarily to talk about whether debt's a good or bad thing, because I feel like that's a very involved conversation. I would rather just talk about like how much we have invested and how it's changed our lives and what the return on investment currently is and what the projected return on investment is, because we haven't necessarily recovered all the return yet. So again, self-development, wellness wisdom, business wisdom, spiritual development, Brett Larkin.
Well, I think I was in a situation, which probably many listeners are too, where I was using my full-time job to fund my yoga business. So I was doing double duty. So I was working in the tech sector and I had a great high-paying job, but I knew it wasn't my path. And I was like, if I could just do anything to make my yoga business make as much as my tech salary, I would be the happiest person in the world. And so that was my goal. And of course, this is why this path is so amazing, because I've earned 100x, 50x than I made in that corporate job, pursuing my own business. But I didn't know that at the beginning. So I stayed in that second job much longer than I probably should have. I was really scared to let it go. It felt like a safety blanket. I think of my 4-year-old and his lovey, he just hanging on to it. So in retrospect, I wish I had more confidence in myself to let go of that job earlier. But that was a great period, because if you're like I was, where you're kind of using your full-time job to fund your moonlighting, that's part of what enabled me to be so experimental and try things. And again, have that like fun energy that I talked about, because there wasn't this pressure yet. I think that's why I hung on, because I knew when I quit the full-time job, it's like, this would be a thing that needed to make money. And I didn't want to put that, it was just like too soon. I didn't want to have the business have to do that for me yet. I just wanted to relish in it and love in it and like bubble bath fun and fairies for as long as possible. So I think a lot of times people like have a lot of hate for their full-time job. And I really encourage my students in that situation. It's like, can you have gratitude for the job that is like bankrolling this next stage for you? And a lot of mindset work around that. And what I did to go, into the finances, which I think you're asking, is like a portion of every paycheck, I literally just put into a separate bank account. I didn't open it a separate bank, but like a separate account that was my yoga business account. So for me, I never went into I went into debt in the sense that like filming the YTT, for example, I was spending more than was in that business account, hoping that pre-selling that, if I got X number of students, and I was always really clear on my numbers. I was like, if I get this many students in the first cohort, I'm going to be in the green, or, net positive. So that's kind of how I structured it and looked at it. So there were some scary moments, but luckily for me, it always worked out. I actually wish I had been more aggressive sooner, like even taken out a small business loan, leverage debt in some of the ways you're saying, Kate, because once I saw the writing on the wall and it was going to work, it just still felt so foreign. And it's just like, well, I'm just this woman. What do I know? But the reality is that was an incredible moment. And I wished I had invested heavier. Another area where I've invested heavily in my business is with search engine optimization and my domain authority and my niche. That was something that felt very foreign to do, because I was kind of like, well, I can just blog. And I really credit my husband for pushing me and saying like, this is real estate on the internet that is valuable to our family. And I think you should really fund backlinks, professional SEO help to really establish this niche you've created. And I'm so grateful that he encouraged me to do that. And I've spent a ton of money on that, and it really paid off, especially during COVID, when I was just so established in my niche, 5 years ahead doing SEO work in what's now, a really hot search term, online yoga teacher training. So yeah, that's a little bit that I can share.
And what about wellness wisdom? So your personal wellness wisdom that you've invested
in terms of my own training,
and the ROI. How do we met? And it's such a hard question, but we do try to delineate it at Yoga Healer. Like, how do you measure return on investment of wellness wisdom, especially given that everybody gets a day older every day?
I think the trainings that I've invested in have just paid off in spades. I mean, one training that actually inspired my 300 was like a training where you could actually kind of white label some of their material and use it in your own programs. It was like a lot of business coaching stuff. So it was just the most incredible investment. Like, not only did I learn so much, it's like I was able to build a whole section of my training, taking this other person's information, but, putting my spin on it, of course, like a yoga spin on it. And it just saved me time. It's like, literally, I was able to put the program out like a year and a half earlier. And then, you look at the timeline and getting to COVID, like early, I mean, it's just so worth it. I think about the Kundalini trainings that I invested in. Those led me to meet Guru Singh, who's now my business partner. Like, we now own a joint venture together that is an insanely profitable JV. So if I hadn't invested in that training, I never would have got to meet him in real life, which is what spurred the connection. So, I mean, kind of back to Katie's early point, it's like, in real life, networking is still a thing. I mean, it's been weird the past 18 months, but like, that's where the connection happened, right? It was like a tea break in the training that he and I were able to connect. And I was hoping he would just let me interview him for a different Kundalini product I was putting out. Turns out, now we're business partners. So, I mean, the ROI on that investment. So I think it's, it's not just what you're going to learn, it's the people you're going to meet, the contacts you're going to make. So many people from that training, I actually have hired some of them. They teach in my 300. So yeah, incalculable.
Katie.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just learning a lot from both of you right now. I never had any training in any of this, and I've kind of just I'm a bhakti yogini. Now I'm kind of catching up on the structural side of Shakti. But yeah, I think I always have been more on the conservative end. I want to really
but not in. With, but I just want to, I kind of want to interrupt and steer and I know I'm rude this way, but like, we've all invested in our own wellness. And so as a bhakti yogi, like, you've invested intensely in.
Oh yeah. I'm not conservative at all when it comes to spending.
Talk about that and the ROI on that. Cause that's really what I am most interested in, because to me, no one can ever take that from you. Like, our businesses may come and go with Facebook algorithms or YouTube algorithms, because we are all insanely vulnerable in that way. And we would all just honestly probably teach on the street if, right. But it'd be a different deal, but no one can take away what we know.
Yeah. Gillian Welch wrote a song about that. And she said it about Napster, in the early days of Napster, that they figured it out that we were going to do it anyway, no matter if they didn't pay. And so, yes, to that. But I think in terms of trainings and ROI, this is where I feel like the connection that you have to your intuition is really important. And to be able to discern the difference between, oh my God, my heart is singing, I'm going to go to the California College of Ayurveda and I'm going to study with this teacher and blah, 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 blah. And there is no force on the planet that will stop me, even if my parents don't know how to pronounce it, which you and I have a similar story, right? And so there's that, which is like heart and will and action all in total alignment. And then there's this other thing that I've seen in a lot of my students, and maybe a little in myself, but I have plenty of vikalpas. I'm not saying I don't, but that's not one of them. But I've seen it with a lot of students. Is the shadow side to that is I can be so obsessed with the trainings that I fail to launch. And there's that, well, if I just get one more certification problem, and I just want to do two things right now. And one is applaud Brett and Cate Stillman and Cate Silcox for actually being such renegades. and now I'm beginning to know actually how I know you, Brett, because I remember being like, oh my God, online teacher training. I bet she gets a lot of flack for that, and feeling really connected to you because I had started an Ayurvedic online training. We only do it online. And let me tell you, we could have long talks about this. Like, it was like, no, like, you can't, who do you think you are to do this? And so I've gone off in a little bit of a tangent, but my point is, like, the ROI on a training with someone where your heart is deeply speaking to you is immeasurable. But I think that there's a way in which we can get caught in this over certification idea that prevents us from actually feeling like we're ready to step out the door.
Yeah. In yoga health coaching, we call it getting caught in modality training when you're actually ready for business training. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, because it often is also, and people might be successful at whatever, $100,000, $200,000 a year. And they think they need another modality. This is actually one of the reasons yoga teachers start studying Ayurveda, is they're like, well, if I just knew Ayurveda, I'd make more money or whatever. And it's like, no, it's just a business model issue. It's not a modality issue. I think the part that I want to highlight in here, because we all were in it for svadhyaya, for self-wisdom, and for, I think for, whether it was body wisdom or whether it was enlightenment wisdom or awake living, or however we want to say it, that there was another reality than the one we'd been interfacing with in modern culture that was like, there's something more. And we all did the needful investing to be with the teachers and mentors to get access into the forbidden wisdom, right? Into the sacred, into the secret. And that is not normal behavior. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I was talking about with some of my team in Manila earlier this week. It's like, what keeps people, what keeps them, what keeps us from investing in that which really has return on investment in the human life, right? It's like, if you're what you got, if your kids are what, they need you to be everything you can be, or your partner, or if that's all we really have, it doesn't look like insurance covers it. It's not, and it's not going to cover it. So stop thinking that that's the path, and start doing what we've all done, which is like, get the ROI on that is, first of all, you get to enjoy it, right? And you get to have the breakdowns and the breakthroughs, and you get to be with people who are growing. But then the other thing is, like, it leads to places that no other path will lead to. To me, I mean, that's like, it's especially because we're all involved with not just holistic wellness wisdom, but with enlightenment, a path of enlightenment. So any closing thoughts on that? And then I don't want to let you lovely ladies go. I want to do this for hours, but I know you all have things to do.
No, Cate, I just want to applaud and thank you for, organizing this session and bringing us together. I think I've always just admired you so much. And I think this was a really incredible way to spend my afternoon and, get to connect with Katie too. So I just want to shout you out for putting this together, and hopefully everyone listening is walking away with some value. I think, my parting words would just be like, take action now. And the thing that scares you to death is the neon sign that's like, go here. That is good. That is normal. We're scared at every level of business. You never stop being scared, because I think people look at, Katie or you or me, and they're like, oh, well, they don't wake up petrified. Like, there is always the darkness. The darkness never goes away. We live in a polarity planet. The thing is, that darkness looks different at every stage of business, and you get wiser. And with the right mentors and the right mindset, you learn not to focus on it anymore. It just takes a back seat. So take action, do something that scares you. That's my parting words.
Yeah, I'm sitting here with the three of you, and I'm thinking about this book, and I can't remember her name now, but the title is The Double Goddess Power. And some of the first original sculptures that we have found of prehistoric humans are those of two women sitting together as priestesses, as goddesses. And there's such a power in women uplifting and supporting women. And so just sitting with you guys and learning from you all, and here's another big piece, celebrating you guys and the differentiation that the two of you bring. It's so different than me, and yet there's all this commonality, and I get to learn from you all. And I think this toxic idea that we're competing with people, or that really has to go out the window. And the more that I've actually leaned into people to help me and on the podcast, promote people that are doing the same types of things as me, the ocean is sort of rising for everyone. And I think to really look to your community and uplift one another as a double goddess power kind of vibe, I think is a super important thing to remember too, as an entrepreneur, especially as a woman. That networking thing, I hadn't really understood that till lately, just how important it is, because I say I'm an introvert that extroverts really well, and if you're like, hey, do you want to go home and like watch Netflix and read a book and take a bath or go to a party? Like, I'm totally on the left side of that equation. But getting out there and meeting people and sharing with people has been such an incredible way to get excited again about what other people are doing. And that has started to inform everything that I'm now creating. And lastly, all of the great explosive quote successes that I have had in my career life have come from reaching out to someone else and saying, hey, I've got this idea. I just sat down and wrote this book like a crazy person. I don't have an agent. I don't have a blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what you do to get a book published. And I just started talking about what I had created. And that is how every single thing has happened for me. So don't be afraid to talk about your creations and ask for help.
Amen. Awesome. We'll do it again. Thanks, guys. So again, this is Brett Larkin, Cate Silcox, and hosted by me, Cate Stillman. Ugh.